at first it was folks going back to Mexico. Now you're then saying folks going back to El Salvador. Now you're saying people going back to Libya. But at some point, this can and will affect you. And if you don't have due process, we have no rule of law.
Welcome to Queen City News Plus. I'm Brian Blakely.
And I'm Chief Legal Analyst Khalif Rhodes.
All right. Good to see you, Khalif. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Brian. You know, another day, another legal topic. Let's figure it out.
Let's get after it here. We got court is in session right now. We're talking about a judge that has warned the Trump administration against deportations of the migrants to Libya. That's a big story. It raises a lot of eyebrows because of the nature of Libya, a terrorist state, an authoritarian state that was not something to do with a place that a lot of people would think about you'd be sending there. And so in Trump, when he was asked about it, he said he didn't know anything about it. But then the White House and the government, they did say that they were considering doing something like that. Where do we go from here?
We go a lot of different places, Brian. First of all, let's say this. We're talking about deporting people to Libya that are not from Libya. So that's probably going to be the weirdest part about this whole situation. It's another day. It's another talk about Trump and attempting to deport folks out of this country to somewhere else. Now, when you're talking about El Salvador and folks that are from there, okay, that may make sense. But when you're talking about folks that are nowhere near from Libya and attempting to try to figure out how you can send them to Libya, well, how do you even get back from there? How does that process work out if you are wrongfully detained and deported to a country that you've never been? You hear the argument sometimes from people that say, look, my parents were born in America, but they're originally from Thailand or something, and now you're going to deport me to a country that I've never been to. Well, this is literally, you're deporting them to a country not only have they never been to, but their families have never been to. And the biggest problem with all of this, Brian, and this is what their attorneys are saying, due process. We got to have some type of due process. At some point in this country, due process, the most important part in our legal process, has to occur.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things you talk about when it comes to the immigration issue. It's always about the due process, whether it's to El Salvador or when we're talking to Libya today. And also, the cost of these type of things too, Khalif, it's $17,000 is what it's been labeled to deport somebody out of the country. When it comes to the immigrants. And talking to Libya, that's got to drive the cost up even more for the federal government.
I mean, if we're talking about cutting costs and cutting waste and cutting, terrible spending, you can't be talking about sending folks to places that are even further than El Salvador would be, which is Libya. One of the things that plaintiffs talked about is that these folks are being removed without any type of hearing that talks about, like, will they be placed in any type of fear? They're being moved without any type of motion or any type of assessment to see, will their life be placed in danger? Those are the types of things when we talk about due process, but cost is also a consideration. Why? Because now we're talking about additional litigation. So while on the one hand, you may be cutting costs by cutting programs and cutting dollars and cutting spending, but you're also increasing costs because you're increasing litigation. These folks that have representation that, again, have never been to these countries are seeking their type of recourse. I mean, you have to have an opportunity to be heard. And the biggest thing is what we have is this isolationism type of approach now to our country where, hey, they're not talking about me, they're talking about them. But at first it was folks going back to Mexico. Now you're then saying folks going back to El Salvador. Now you're saying people going back to Libya. But at some point, this can and will affect you. And if you don't have due process, we have no rule of law. We have to have an opportunity for folks to have notice, to have an opportunity to be heard, and have an opportunity to state their case. And the government has the burden. They have the burden to be able to prove why they are deporting these individuals. A deportable offense normally is one that is a crime of moral turpitude, and not just a crime, but a conviction of a crime of moral turpitude. But if you're not having that, and if you haven't had a hearing to determine if that's occurred, then what are we doing here?
One of the things you find here, too, with a lot of these cases, you find out after the fact. So if you're an immigrant family that has someone being detained right now, it's very tough to find out where they are or where they're going. And then if you find out they're going to Libya. But you talk about that due process. But going forward, what kind of rights do you have, or how can you fight this? It just happens you're going to have to fight this in court.
Well, just like all of the legal system, I mean, most of the legal system is cut out and unfair for folks that don't have means, right? So if you don't have resources to have an attorney to fight for you in these situations, yes, you're just going to be deported because there's not going to be anyone there speaking on your behalf. And so it has to be a perfect situation where now someone is aware, you have family members that are looking for you, and they're recognizing that you have been picked up in the process process for deportation has started. And typically what the government has been doing in most recent times is they're taking you from the state that you were in originally and moving you to like a Louisiana or to a Texas, getting you prepped to be deported. So in that process, your family doesn't even know that you've been removed from the state. That's going to be also problematic if you have no representation, because you're seeking an attorney that practices in the state that you were picked up in to be communicating with the federal government to try to figure out how they can file a motion to get a court to enter an injunction to have you not be able to be taken out of the country. I mean, I have to overemphasize. You're talking about folks from Vietnam. Talking about folks from Lagos, talking about folks from the Philippines that be taken to Libya, which is thousands of miles away from where they're from. I couldn't imagine being dropped off in California, being from North Carolina right now, if this was the first time I was in this country and I came here illegally with no means. But you're telling me you're going to take me thousands of miles away from where I'm originally from. I mean, extremely, extremely cruel and unusual. And these are folks that most of them haven't been convicted of a crime.
Yeah, and one of the things we were talking about too is we were saying earlier that you'd have to ask the State Department, or the Department of Homeland Security, when Trump was asked about it. So whether he was lying or not, or whether he just said he didn't really know. But this is a place that has been described as hellscape, open slave markets, human rights organization. So this is a really, really a drastic, extreme, and very cruel place that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, and the other part that's kind of confusing is that Libya is saying that they have no idea what's happening. Multiple parts in Libya. There's one that the government themselves has said, look, we have no idea what's happening. There's been no communication with us, right? But then you had an outside group in Libya say the exact same thing, that their provisional government of the national unity said, we also have not been coordinating with the United States. So then the speculation is that they're probably talking with and communicating with a non-legitimate organization there. So you're telling me that the United States, the largest country in the world, the most powerful on the planet, is coordinating and negotiating not with Libya's government, but with some non-legitimate government within Libya to take these prisoners. That also would be problematic, because now if we have a situation where we got to get them back, if maybe there's someone there that's wrongly deported, how do you go back and tell not the country of Libya, but this illegitimate government group that's working there, hey, oh, yeah, we need this guy back? That's going to be a problem as well. I mean, this is problematic multiple times over. There are going to be lawsuits on top of lawsuits with this. And the other thing I'll say, Brian, is this. Once you get outside the country, then the Trump administration will be able to argue what they've argued in the most recent case, that now this falls under the purview of the president. And because it falls under the purview of the president, you, judge, can't tell the president how to deal with foreign affairs. Because I've gotten these people outside the country, now it's a foreign affairs issue. It's no longer a United States issue. And that, I think, has been the strategy so far.
How much of this is shock value, do you think, when it comes to Trump and his history of this type of thing with talking about distractions, or possibly you talking about Alcatraz the other day and opening that back up? Alcatraz officials there had no idea what was going on. They're a museum right now. So this whole thing about, but the fact is they did deport people to El Salvador, and now the White House did state that the State Department did state that they were trying to, or looking into, deporting people to Libya as well.
What I can say is I don't think there's anything shock value about this. The Trump administration has been clear that their number one objective is to do more deportations in this administration than ever before in history. So I think he's
what he got elected on.
I think
number
he's
one
been
issue.
Elected on it. He feels that there was a mandate to do that, and he's been incentivized, not just in the public sector, but in the private sector, to go out and do it. So I think there's not a shock factor. This is really, I want to do this, and I'm going to see it to the end. But on the other side, with the Alcatraz thing, I think that probably was more political and publicity stunt than anything. I mean, it's not just a museum. It's a profitable museum, a museum that's allowing folks and visitors to come there on a daily basis, and it's not in a condition that it could house anyone. And so you're telling me we're talking about waste. We're talking about, spending that's not something that we need. It's going to cost millions, if not billions, to rebuild a prison like that. And then to get the folks to the island, you got to put them on a ferry to get them over there. I mean, the costs are double and triple what it would to house and take a normal prisoner in any one of these other, jails and prisons that we have around the country. So what I can say is that for sure, to me, is shock value. But this deportation situation, I think nothing is about this is shock value. I think nothing's off the table. Most of the things that they're doing here, he talked about it when he campaigned, and he wants to be able to say promise made, promise kept.
And quickly, though, immigrants here in the country, how can they protect themselves going forward?
It's really a mixed bag. I mean, the first thing is you start with coming to this country legally, right? If you're here legally and you're doing all the things that you were supposed to do legally, then you should have no concern, right? Now, but if you came here illegally, it's a scary time right now. You're in a situation where you're trying to evade and not show up, not have any interactions with the public, not have any actions with law enforcement, because if you have an interaction with law enforcement in this era, you are subject to be deported. It's pretty clear. So now finding ways to evade that is seemingly what the next strategy is. And so I guess, do we want that as a society? Do we want to find a way to make people feel uncomfortable? And if that's the answer, then the Trump administration is being successful in what they're attempting to do. But if the goal is to ensure that people have a clear path to citizenship, even if they came here in an illegal manner, if they were fleeing and running from persecution and they were looking for some type of refuge as a refugee, then you want to have an opening, an opportunity for them to be protected. And right now, it's not there.
All right. Chief Legal Analyst Khalif Rhodes. That is Order in the Court. You've been watching Queen City News Plus. Be sure to download and watch our full series of Queen City News Plus originals on our app. You can find Queen City News Plus using your streaming devices, including Roku, Amazon Fire Stick, and Apple TV. Just search the name Queen City News Plus. Your support will help us to continue our series.